Heyo out there, the man, the myth, the legend, Patrick Ryan II is back and dropping some of that Jedi knowledge in health and wellness. We focused on mental health, funny enough, on Mental Health Day. Didn't even know it until we were like halfway through the podcast. Kind of interesting. That came in very handy, being that, the episode was focused on mental health. And with that came other shiny gold nuggets that Pat produces. I mean, if you guys follow him on social media, which I hope you do, on Instagram, he's aware_life, ABQ. And if you're lucky enough to be his friend on Facebook, he just always has really interesting stuff that I think that we could all probably just take a step back and learn something from people that have, kind of focused on not only physical health, but mental health. And that's one of the reasons why I brought him on, especially in this unprecedented time. We talk exercise at home. We talk about things that you can do to supplement your medicine cabinet. And you'll learn what I mean by that as you go through the episode. And COVID and its many ripples we feel in all of our lives and its widespread effect on our mental health. So I was a little transparent for my part, trying to kind of talk about how I've been trying to seek out a therapist. And it's interesting, never done that, 32 years old. And I thought it'd be interesting to do that. And it's harder than I thought it would be. So we touch on that kind of stuff in here. This one's a great one to listen to if you need a pick me up, or maybe just some ideas to get you thinking about your own mental health more honestly. Make sure to check out Aware Training Online, which is Pat's amazing program, which is basically to make a better version of yourself for yourself. And I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Stay tuned, as I've always got more episodes coming, fam. Stay safe out there and have a happy Halloween.
Interviews with people pursuing greatness.
One, let's roll. Sweet. Yeah, it's looking good. Okay. We're talking about another podcast here with my buddy Patrick Ryan.
What's going on, dude?
From Aware Life. I had said it right?
Aware Online Coaching.
Aware Online Coaching.
But it's a common misconception. Well, not misconception. It's common because my Instagram handle is aware_life ABQ. There's my plug for my Instagram.
Perfect. It was clean. It was smooth. Right. It's pro. No, we're talking about Guy Raz, his podcast.
How I built this.
How I built this, and I wanted to tell Pat about that, and I figured we'd trigger the podcast. We've been sitting here hanging out for a little while. While I was talking about this one in particular, but there was one about the guys that had created Vice. And
oh wow, I'll have to listen to that one.
So good, man. It might be either that one or Invisibilia. He has that other Guy Raz has that other podcast, Invisibilia.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They're similar. The two shows. I can't remember which one it was, but it's an NPR, and he talks about how the guy that created Vice and the co-founder were both recovering heroin addicts. And I didn't know that. Like, they both went into rehab, I think together or something like that, or had grown up together in Ontario. And apparently heroin's, I think big metros are all like this, but it's a pretty big issue there, I guess.
Okay.
They came through they had started at some magazine, and then the guy wanted to sell the magazine. And when they sold it, they bought it. Those two heroin guys, former junkies. And the only reason why I say so is, like, you wouldn't think these guys would create what is the behemoth of Vice today, but they renamed the magazine as Vice, and then they just did a paper magazine only. And this wasn't that long ago. So this is flying in the face of what a lot of was happening, where a lot of papered magazines and newspapers were going to online only. Well before COVID and all that shit. So it was really crazy to hear the story there, because I'm like, fuck, man, to talk about somebody that comes from zero, that is absolute zero. Like, you and I don't think you've ever had an issue with heroin. I've never used this stuff, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, that's not a place that I could ever see myself. But then on the like having started or ever being there, but on the reverse of that guy's probably driving around a Maserati or something, a Ferrari, and thinking the same thing, like, fuck, how did I get here? And I love the Guy Raz show because it's very, the way that he tells the story even is it's almost like he's just in disbelief as well, like he's just like, and to think that these guys met each other in rehab, and then they came up with this, with this idea for a Vice magazine. I don't know. I don't remember all the details to it, but it was very interesting to think that that's, we were talking about origin stories and humble beginnings, and Vice is now, I mean, it's got to be so many millions a year that it's worth. I don't know. Whatever.
I don't know, but yeah, it's prominent.
Yeah.
People know what it is.
Yeah, you can't miss anything Vice. I don't think I've ever been on the internet and not read a Vice article. I read the news every day.
Sure.
So I'm always finding Vice stuff, and I'm like, man, I would have never thought. So even a little teeny tiny podcast like A Perch of Birds had its beginnings, and that's kind of what Pat and I were talking about. And now that I'm people pursuing greatness, this is the first podcast post-COVID.
Yep.
Or
intra-COVID.
That's true. I can't say post. I'd say post when we didn't have like any infrastructure to how we behave. I don't think we do now anyways, but now everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got it's almost politicized, all parts of this thing now. And especially being an election year. 2020, man. So I haven't talked to you since last year on the podcast.
Right.
Easily.
I think so.
So talk to me a little bit, man. Like how has COVID treated you? How are things going?
Yeah, it's definitely been, and I think I speak for many people in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not. But it's been, so let's see. So that happened in March. So that was 7-ish months ago, almost 7 months ago. So a lot of growth. I've definitely grown in more ways than in such a short period of time that I could have never imagined or kind of forecasted. But things have been good. Obviously with my roots being in and around the online sphere, kind of like what we've been talking about on previous podcasts, it's been really interesting seeing that become more of a prominent and, how do you want to say, more well accepted medium of obtaining help.
Okay.
With your nutrition, your exercise, your health, just in general, because I was working for a commercial gym prior to COVID. Things closed down, and during our break, I guess you'd say from March to around June, I made the conscious decision to not return, and knowing that there was more work that needed to be done and more attention that needed to be given towards my online endeavors, because that's just, I knew in some way, shape, or form back in 2014, 2015, when I was doing it on the side, I knew that was going to be the future of the industry. It's a very progressive leg of the industry. Excuse me. And so I just decided, okay, I'm gonna go all in on this and give it a shot. So I'm doing that. It's been really fun. It's been super, super exciting. Although I think a lot of people feel the same way. We don't know what the future holds just in general, but relative to what I can control in the industry that I'm a part of, I'm incredibly excited. I think there's a very bright future to be able to connect with and help more people.
Do you think that you would have done this if you didn't have the additional pressures of COVID coming about? Well,
it was always a matter of when, not if. But okay. I think it's really interesting in that this whole experience speaks to how, let's see, because this is a huge hurdle that I work through with clients, but it's no different in any other dimension of life, right? To where we create these, and I'm speaking through my own experience here, where, I knew I was going to be leaving the big box gym industry at some point in time. Yeah. So let's say back in 2019, or even before that, I kind of put myself on a 3 to 5 year plan,
like a timer kind of thing.
Yeah. But you create this arbitrary number that makes you feel comfortable.
Right.
And in all reality, it's like, well, am I really setting up a pretty strict timeline of 3 to 5 years, or am I just throwing something out there to make me feel comfortable? Right. That's perpetuate me reinforcing this habit of kicking the can down the road.
Right. Constantly backburning.
Right.
Backburning everything.
I knew it was going to happen. It was a matter of when, not if. And in all reality, I'm grateful everything that has happened the way it has, because it's just forced my hand. You know what I mean?
That speaks exactly to why I bring you on this podcast, what you just said. You're grateful for these things happening. Only Pat would be humble enough to be able to say that he's grateful for what's happened, man.
Well,
I love it.
So far, so good. You know, the tomorrow could be completely different. And I'm not saying this whole experience has been just rainbows and butterflies.
Absolutely.
The entire time,
And I
you
get
know
what you're
I mean?
saying. Yeah, for sure.
It's been very difficult. It's been very trying, but
there's growth out of it.
Yeah, exactly. That in and of itself has brought on exponential amounts of growth as far as like, okay, you and tying into the whole online sphere of things where it's like before this all happening, on at least in my limited circle, this could be different for other people, but online work was just kind of viewed as second tier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it was like, oh yeah, you do that, but whatever. Like it doesn't even hold a candle to in-person stuff.
Right.
And which was definitely hard in its own right, but I feel like I've kept at it because it's something I'm passionate about. And I think it can be molded and done in such a way to where it can be completely life-changing without having to meet somebody with somebody in person. So, and then something like this happens and people are like, oh, hey, what about this online thing you've been doing? You know what I mean? So if that's what helps, give people the opportunity to give that a shot, I say more power to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole experience has been a trip, man. It's been really interesting, but I'm very excited for what the future holds in that realm of reality.
Hell yeah, dude. That's so awesome. I think it's cool that you are you're able to handle that change and then also teach on it. You know what I mean? Like that's you took a risk and beyond that you were kind of pushed, with COVID being at our door, but I think it's great that you're going all online, and and that's another thing too is we all know this. I work in IT, right? I'm not a health person, but I can tell you from my experiences, people go into remote working in IT in droves, like huge amounts of them. It was a huge adjustment for a lot of people, but a lot of people are finding out they really like it as well.
Sure.
People are waking up and getting dressed, brushing their teeth, getting themselves together, and they're sitting down at their desk in their room, and they're flipping on a camera and jumping into meetings, and they're doing things. And some are finding out they really like it. Some are finding out that they can't stand it.
Sure.
And then some people have screaming children, a la me, in the background, and it's just like you don't know if you're with it or against it, But
sure.
I think COVID's done a lot for people to almost have to look internally. I mean, being quarantined for any amount of time, even when we were, so quarantined, not like, officially have to stay in your house quarantined. But, I remember April, May, I was nervous to go for a run because I was scared that, I could be spreading around the disease or I could be picking it up, and it was just such unknown times. And, coming from the IT perspective again, it was pretty crazy for folks that are doing what I do because all of a sudden that we flipped a switch and everybody had to go home and now you need to support them in a different way. But it tested me quite a bit. It taught me the stuff that I do know really expressed itself. And I like that because, it got to shine a little bit, and same with you, you're testing yourself with this online stuff and you're finding out that you can handle it very well. Where do you see this going eventually? Do you think that you could ever, I might be pushing this a little far. I don't think we've ever talked about this, but do you ever see yourself opening your own gym or like a boutique spot?
I don't know. That still remains to be seen. So, for instance, when I was in college, that was where my mind was at first and foremost, it was like going through college, finishing school. It was at that moment, it was like, well, I just need to get in at a gym and start training. And that's when I ended up working at one of the facilities I had worked at previous to all this. So I got into that space, but it was while I was working in a big box gym, and really how I was utilizing my free time, in that I discovered that, and this was back in like 2013, 2014, that there was some form of online coaching to be administered. And it started turning on some light bulbs for me, where it was like, because initially I was thinking, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but at this point in my life, I don't know that I have much of an interest in it, because it just, especially relative to the state of the world, it's just like, well, I know certain parts of the world are closing back down now.
Or may again.
Right. and really it's putting the client at a major disservice if you've got something put together that's so ironclad that in order to give somebody some form of help, that it's contingent upon them meeting you somewhere,
Right.
instead of having something that's malleable and as flexible as online infrastructure that can still help people with their exercise, coach them through their eating, stuff of that sort, to where it's like you could be going on vacation or you could be going through a global pandemic and your health is still taken care of.
Right.
So, but during my early years in coaching at a gym, the online thing looked like that was something worth surveying for me, and it really changed my perception dramatically as to what I wanted things to look like. So I'm not opposed to opening up a space in the future sometime.
Yeah.
But at least right now, I don't know that I have a huge interest in it, because it's literally,
Well, it's so unknown, bro.
well, but beyond that, it's like I almost feel like I kind of left that already to a degree, to where it was like I was doing in-person training. That was the majority of my business. And I had to continuously 5-6 days a week report back to a physical location in order to train people. So,
Yeah,
and on
that would
top
be a
of that,
pain in the
like
ass.
I wasn't running the entire facility, but I was in charge of my business. I was in charge of my client load. I was in charge of scheduling. I was in charge of billing. All that kind of stuff was on me, like staying on top of all that kind of stuff. So I guess you could say in some way, shape, or form, I have just left that to a degree.
So he's like, I don't want none of that.
Yeah,
no
well,
more.
and not to say that won't change in the future, and I can delve into that into a different context.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely enjoying the breather from it, and being able to know that I'm able to serve people across the world in such a way to where it helps open their minds and change their perspective as to, oh, maybe I don't need to actually see, like for instance, people who feel like they need help with their eating. Well, if people feel like they need help with their eating, what does that have to do with coming in and getting a workout in?
Right.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. And you don't need to be in person.
And I'm not
to
saying
give them that
they
advice.
both help each other out. But yes, like you said, like if things are really needing to be done in such a way to where it's effective and efficient for the client, why should you have to walk into a gym to get personal training from someone who maybe is only qualified to give you exercise prescription, when you can go online and get somebody who's very well qualified, very well versed in not only coaching you through your nutrition, but having the systems in place to make sure the extended support outside of use of the platform is there to make sure that you're taken care of. So that's another thing that's been really interesting relative to all this, because working in that space in person, I found very interesting, because I felt like to a certain extent, I actually wasn't able to give the client the full breadth or the full experience that I think they
So you're saying, like, if I came into the gym and I wanted to like work out and also talk about nutrition, that you're really giving me just the workout piece of it, but nutrition is not necessary for me to have to be there at the gym physically to talk about that as well?
Right.
Okay.
So like, for instance, in a perfect example where I felt like clients I was serving weren't getting as much as I thought that they should have been getting out of it. So you're almost asking the coach to do double or triple duty in a session, when in all reality, like, the ability to absorb any of the information during that session is going to be dramatically lessened. So like, what I'm getting at is like, okay, you're coming into the gym to work out with a coach. You're going to work out with them for an hour.
Right.
Well, in my opinion, the intention and the energy should be focused on working out.
Right. And
Because
then,
you're lifting weights, you're learning how to do stuff properly, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So how on earth are we seriously going to have enough time, and not just enough time, but enough intentional time to talk about your eating?
well, I'm blasted. I just came off of sweating my ass off because Pat's, busting me up, right? Hit my end of my hour, and then I'm going to sit down all sweaty and like pull out a notebook and go to school. I totally get that.
And not even just that, but like trying to somehow discuss really important pieces of learning about how you eat, why you eat the way you eat in between sets.
Yeah.
It doesn't, when it comes to being able to actually retain that information and have a game plan as to how to put that into place while your coach is trying to train you on how to do a squat properly, it's very counterintuitive.
Right.
There needs to be separate segments of time for that. So it was like, I almost felt like I was pushed into a corner and pigeonholed, where it's like, I almost felt like I was perpetuating the same problem that clients were trying to get out of, but they didn't know how to get out of it.
Right.
So, and what I'm getting at is people feeling like, oh, I just need to exercise more. And it's like, no, actually, you could probably exercise less, not push yourself nearly as hard. But if you had the right nutrition coaching, you wouldn't have to go through that cycle of, oh, I've got to push harder. I got to push harder. I got to push harder. And it was like, I felt like I was almost perpetuating that problem, because it was like, well, you came into the gym where most clients aren't wanting to spend that hour sitting down and talking about their nutrition. They want to get a workout in. So it was like, well, okay, I guess we're just going to get a workout in. So that's what's really exciting about this transition, to where it's like, there needs to be intentional time dedicated to people's eating and the behaviors that influence their eating.
That's huge. And I think it's lost on a lot of people, that mix that you're talking about. A lot of times, I've been doing fitness. I've been doing fitness for a long time. But a lot of people think that, they always tell me that they're, like, I work in an office, and like the front desk ladies will buy boxes of donuts, and pizza will be sitting next to that because it's Friday. And they're like, oh, Morgan, grab a donut and a pizza and you could sure use it. You're just going to run it all off. And I'm like, well, I'm like, we could talk for a while about how this actually works, But I think that's a misconception that, like, if you're not busting your ass to the point of like physical exhaustion every single workout, then that's why you're not meeting your goals, and, frustration can ensue because you're like, well, I'm following all these fucking YouTube things or apps or blah, 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 and nothing changes. One of my big shticks that I like to give people shit about is shakes. Going to shake places in the morning, that drives me crazy, man. I'm like, why do you do that? They're like, it's my meal replacement. I'm like, why do you need to replace your meal? Just eat good food, Like, why do you need to go and get the shake? Like, I got to get my shake. What's the... and this podcast is not big enough to get me in trouble, but I guess it's just an opinion anyways. But what's the one called that it's like a system, NutriShake or some shit like that. It's the real big down here. They do the shakes. Herbalife.
Oh,
That's the one. Oh, my God. They've got a shake for everything you can possibly think of. Like, it's like your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, but it's also like, secondsies. It's your midnight snack. It's your wake up and go thing. I'm like, man, I don't know. I feel like, and what makes me laugh is the shake ingredients. They go way out of their way to tell you this comes from natural foods, great foods. I'm like, why don't you just eat the food, right?
Sure.
And granted, some people have to be taught this, but a lot of people have to be taught this. That's what I should really say. But I think that it's lost on folks that it is a combination of the pair of things. And like, big misconception is, what you eat is not necessarily going to change whether or not you gain weight from it. And it does in a lot of ways, but it really comes down to a calorie deficit. If you want to lose weight, eat less calories than you're supposed to. And all of that stuff goes out the window when you start to make it as simple as that. You know what I mean? But again, you have to teach people that are not, they haven't learned that, or they haven't taken on the same fitness journeys like I have, and a lot of your clients that eventually have learned these things, that it's super tough to like figure it out on your own, and to get like, I could totally see why the online works, because fucking you can send me an Excel spreadsheet of what to eat and then tell me what to work out as. I don't know if that's what you do, right? But let's say that that's the route that you go. And that's huge for me, because I know so many people that ask me, what should I eat? What should I eat every day? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I have it figured out for myself, and a lot of times people give up on their routine or whatever their goal is. Like those January 1st people in the gym, they barely get through the first month and they're already burnt out because there's no change in what's happening, So I could see that being huge for you. Do you see that more people are jumping on now? Are you getting like an influx of patients? What do you call them? Customers? Clients? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely picked up. And I think it's because I view it as an extension of people's willingness to just be crafty when it comes to, okay, like your options are limited. How do you, like, for instance, and this was an intention I set a long time ago, where it's like, at our house, we're continuing to slowly but surely like put together our garage as a workout space.
Nice.
We don't have much of an interest in going back to a gym. It's really, everything that's happened has really hit home around the fact that, well, why should we have to feel like we've got to go somewhere separate from our home to nourish our health?
All the gyms right now where they're listening are cringing. No.
But and obviously that's what's working well for us, but I would advocate that for many people where it's like, why, if you can, and it doesn't mean you have to have a full out crazy setup, but what I'm getting at is people acknowledging like, okay, resources are limited. I can't go to the gym. So what can I do to keep me on track? So it's kind of forced many people's hands to at least be more open with and survey the option of working with somebody online. Whereas in the past, they may have been like, oh, that's substandard. It's not going to be legit. And now that the world is where it's at, people are a little bit more open to it.
It's a new normal, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually giving that a good shot. And, tying into one of your points earlier, as far as just people feeling like they've got to work out 1,000,000 miles an hour in order to lose weight. That's honestly probably the one of the most fun hurdles and challenges that I have the opportunity of working through with clients, is because it is possible to lose weight with actually doing minimal amounts of exercise.
Do you I just thought of it, and I'm sorry to ask.
No,
is there a difference in males and females for how? I've been told that men need to work out more. And food, I guess, I don't know if that's part of that deal, but need to work out more than a woman would in terms of typically losing weight. And not like there's any not one's better than the other, but just the methodologies of how the bodies would have to be treated, or the planned, the workout that they go through would have to be different. Do you see that through your experience, that like a woman would actually be able to exercise less and eat differently to lose weight, where a guy could exercise more and maybe eat more or less the same and have the same results for weight loss, things like that?
Sure. It's hard for me to say because a lot of it's way too varied.
Like personal, each person.
Right.
Okay.
But I've had male clients that have lost, like I just got done working with a client that lost between 15 to 20 pounds in 3 months and was doing very little exercise.
Interesting.
A father of 2, and he was just walking, but we focused on making adjustments to how he ate.
Sure.
And some adjustments to what he ate. And same with, I've had plenty of female clients that minimal amounts of exercise and have lost weight because we've just adjusted things around their eating.
Sure.
And
so anatomically speaking, you don't think that had anything to do with it? It's more about like each individual scenario.
It has to be, at least for me.
Okay.
Like it's always going to be very difficult for me the vast majority of the time to make blanket statements and saying that, oh, men need to work out more, women need to work out more, because a lot of the time I get both men and women that work with me that think that they need to just burn the midnight oil in order to lose weight. And
Sure.
I'm coaching them, even with the exercise prescription. The first month is very minimal amount. Like, it's not super crazy high intense workouts.
Yeah.
It's just focusing on movement and quality of movement. And in the background, we're working on their eating in such a way to where it helps create kind of like a paradigm shift for each client of being like, oh, I didn't have to beat the crap out of myself this month in order
Right.
to lose 3, 4, 5 pounds. And it's like, oh man, this might be a little bit more simple and a little bit less stressful than I had ever thought it to be.
Got you. Okay. Well, and the reason why I say so, I have a few people that I've been making running plans for. And, when I make a running plan, it's really based off of zero experience. Disclaimer for all you people that have gotten those from me. My experience for like prescribing something for another human being is all personal. There's no school in my background. So, it's a lot of stuff of trial and error. But my point is to get to a goal. And it's not the same goal that most of your clients have, which I'm guessing a lot of them are weight loss. But mine's always like trying to finish like a half marathon in, let's say, 8 weeks at XYZ speed with minimal fallout from how hard you push yourself. So these are the things I prescribe. I'm guessing that a lot of times, because it's based off of me, that people are looking at these workouts and are like, this motherfucker wants me to run what? You know, because like,
Right.
because like it's taken me time to work up to, you know, a half marathon, but and my expectation for somebody like you're kind of doing, and again, not comparing us as the same, but the beginnings of a running plan to me is like you're going to run a mile, you're going to run 2 miles. I want you to very slowly come into it, but then I ramp you up by the time 8 weeks is done and you're at a half marathon. But that's normal for me, where I could see somebody that's not used to that. That may not work. And because, you know, I don't have the knowledge and experience that you do, I think I might break somebody doing that. You know what I mean? But I could totally see where you're coming from when it comes to thinking about things in a very dynamic way. Because again, I'm just thinking like, here's how I get there. You know what I mean? And my plan's not going to work for my neighbor or even you. You know what I mean? Like you just don't run like that. I don't lift like you do. I don't do like a lot of the mobility stuff either. And that's probably why some of my shit hurts. But you know, I'm about to hit up Pat, be like, bro, I think I broke something. I need to call you. It's my bad. But yeah, no, that I can totally see where you're coming from with the not trying to make blanket statements. I know that in the last 2 podcasts, I kept trying to push you in one direction or the other just to see what you'd bite with, you know, with like keto and all that shit.
Right.
And it never seemed to pan out because it was, you know, you thought about it and then you explained it away and I was like, fuck man, he makes really good points. Like, you know, but I wish that I had a little bit more contacts. I even thought about bringing another one of my coworkers in that does the same thing that you do, just in a corporate environment, and having, you know, kind of like a back and forth, because I kind of appreciate. I think I'd referenced this in the last podcast, and I'm not going to take us down that direction. But Joe Rogan had a guest, 2 guests on. One was for keto, and one was for I think it was just like normal food or something. It was like basically ketosis versus like carb based, really, right? And for you guys, I realize I'm tangenting a tiny bit, but ketosis is where your body operates off of fat, that consumes fat for the majority of its energy, where just about everybody else that does not do that is running off of carbs as their main source of energy. And I'm very much generalizing this, but that's essentially the argument. And a lot of times, me with running, there's guys that have done world championship, this and that being ketosis. And then otherwise guys doing all off carbs, all plants, all blah, 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 you know? So I'm always trying to get Pat to swing one direction. Let's see what's going on, you know? But I like the fact that you're able to mix in, not having blanket statements and you're not selling a thing, you know what I mean? That you must be ketosis, you must be this or that, you know? But if I came to you and I wanted to go ketosis, you would coach me in that direction, right? I mean, to be able to help me out.
What I always let people know, it's my job to complement their life and not complicate it. So yeah, I have clients currently that will delve back and forth within a keto diet or intermittent fasting, whatever it might be. Yeah. So it's really, I like to say I'm a diet agnostic.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So you do whatever makes you happy. You know, if that jives with you, that's fine. It's my job as your coach and as the professional in your corner to make sure whatever diet it is that you're utilizing, you're conscious, you're cognizant of what's going on, you're aware of what's going on.
You have cheat days; those are very important.
Sure, or whatever works for that individual, yeah. Right? And I think that's what you're even coming to find in your realm of health and fitness in the running world, where it's like, well, I don't see it as a confusing measure, but I can see how a lot of other people would, where it's like, wait, there's these world-class runners that run incredible, like they're, say, record holders, yeah. And they're on a keto diet or a plant-based diet or,
right.
You know, anywhere, you know, between the two.
Right.
And I think if anything, I think that further reinstills the point of people going on their own journey of self-discovery, yeah. And paying attention to their body, paying attention to how they perform, pay attention to how they sleep, how they feel, and using that in conjunction with, yes, I recommend every so often, once a year or so, go to your doctor, get a physical, get a blood panel, make sure all of that looks good.
Right.
And if you're
especially if you're playing with keto, folks, be careful.
Yeah, and if you're in good working order, then who the hell am I to tell you to stop doing that?
Right. There was that doctor that ate. He's on the carnivore diet. Mm-hmm. He would do a pound of meat every morning and not eat all day, and that's all he would have. And this is an MD at an ER, and the dude was, just hard in the paint for that. What was crazy is he was exactly like he was agnostic for his patients, though. He didn't care what they said. Not didn't care what they said, but didn't care what their diet that they came up with him, came up to talk to him about in his one-on-ones. But for him, he would eat a pound, and I think he got up to like 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds eventually.
Wow.
And he would do blood panels on himself constantly, and he found that he was within the ranges that his MD background would say he's doing fine. I couldn't imagine what his shits look like. I mean, think about it, right? Like if you go into 7 days a week, bro, and you're just eating like prime rib, like that ain't got to smell. How do you?
But see that I think we don't have to go on too deep of a tangent here, but I think that reinforces kind of my point of just being conscious and being aware. Like, cause that is another form of information, right? Like how are your bowel movements?
Right.
Have they gotten better? Are they worse?
Yeah.
Or, anywhere through that spectrum, and being able to look at these different pieces, like what does your urine look like? All that kind of stuff. And using that as information to determine whether or not you're on the right path, you're on your way to the right path, or you need to make adjustments, all that kind of stuff. So like, I don't want to speak for that guy, because it's like, okay, I don't want to assume things are good, bad, or indifferent, but if he's doing that and it works for him, that works for him.
More power to you. Yeah.
If that works for you, man, that works for you. It may not work for me, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you're open like that. So we're touching on diet and exercise. And I talked to Pat a little bit before we started the show. I was thinking about maybe coming up with more mental health stuff, and mental health and as far as we are able to take it, right? Because we're not mental health experts, but Pat deals with a lot of people, especially I'm guessing in the last 6-7 months, that are having to deal with the fallout from COVID, and which is not. We've all had issues with it. Even Pat was saying that that pressure created some diamonds for him, where he was able to come up with things, but it was not without some effort. And same with me at my job. I got blasted because of COVID, and I'm in a particular position where a lot of that rides on my shoulders. And without a doubt, I fucking hated it for a little while. I quit lifting. We all kind of did. If you went to a gym and didn't have a home workout, that messed with me a lot, because the lifting is part of my formula that keeps everything moving with me, because it does a lot for my running, and it does a lot for my mentality, because I know that I can go to the gym and get an hour of just meditating and listening to my music while I'm just like slugging the weights and I'm doing XYZ exercise. And then on the reverse days from that, it's running, which is also my meditation. And for a while there, that all stopped, man. And it really messed with me. Like I was not moving, and it was making me really, really weird. And just from an athletic perspective, coming back out of that hole was a pain in my ass. I'm just recently getting to the point now where I can actually handle some mileage. And I'm starting to lift, and it doesn't feel like death when I go. And I want you guys to know that for my part, the adage of it's harder to get in shape than it is to stay in shape, I think is extremely true. But again, I'm talking all physical. So what contributed to my decline physically also contributed to my mental decline. And I got into kind of a dark place, and I think a lot of us did. So with that, I guess that's a good segue into talking about it just from firsthand experience. Besides yourself, with your clients, do you see a lot of people struggling with being at home, being in the quarantine, and then the fallout from that? What have you been seeing? Yeah,
so obviously I'll speak on many different fronts and dimensions here, if it's cool with you.
Of course.
Because I can reference stuff that I can't not just reference stuff with my clients and what I'm seeing without referencing what I've gone through, as well as what I see broadly and through a broad lens of how I view things have been handled within our society, Western culture, industrialized culture. But
I'm digging this. You're going deep on me, Pat.
Well, yeah. So, and it's funny, like, and by the way, everybody, we did not plan this, but did you know today is Mental Health Awareness Day?
Shit. Oh,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's Saturday. It's Saturday.
That's
I think
awesome.
Today's Mental Health Awareness Day, like national. I don't know. I just been hearing it going around.
Hell, so, I'm going to Google it while you're going.
Google it while I'm chatting. But it's, sure. I'm going to go deep on it, and as long as that's cool. And partly because
that's today.
Yeah. So, what a coincidence.
Yeah, for real.
So, let's see. There's so many different ways I want to go here, but a lot of it just has to do with the fact that I'll be completely transparent with everybody listening. Just just to get it out there. As time has gone on, I've continued to come into a much more comfortable and confident space and being open and honest about my own journey with mental health. So
For sure.
As a means of just kind of getting it out there and it being a healthy means of me venting, leaning on others, getting support from other people, but also as a result, showing people that it's quite okay. Like we're all going through
We're all kind
something.
of a little crazy.
Yeah, we've all got something going on, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's okay to not be okay. And so full transparency to anybody listening, like I am 100,000% a huge advocate for mental health and mental health awareness, getting help, whether it's seeing a therapist, a psychiatrist, anything like that. There's no judgment on my end, and I don't think there should be any judgment period from anybody else that you come into contact with and share that information with. So yeah, this has been a really interesting time, right? And I think everything that's gone on with COVID, it's been interesting, at least from my perspective, because this was something that I've really thought about. So I'm going to go into telling a huge story here. So
Of course, bro.
I just bought a new pair of running shoes.
Okay.
Shout out to Heart and Soul. Y'all are the best
Dude,
spot to
that's
get.
my place.
Yeah.
So what did you get just before you
Got
continue?
these new
Yeah,
New
okay.
Balance.
Nice.
Super comfortable. But I remember ordering the shoes and paying for the shoes and looking up, and there was a sign. Somebody had typed out a thank you note to them and said, it was something to the tune of like, thank you, Heart and Soul, for providing reliable access to my medicine.
Huh.
And I was like, that's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah,
like
dude.
that's a really cool way of looking at
Yeah,
it. So I was
for
like,
sure.
you know what? They're right. Like for them, running is medicine, and having a good pair of shoes for running gives them greater access to their medicine. So I just continued going down this path of thinking and how everything going on with the pandemic and just everything that we deal with in life. You know, life's not easy for many, myself included. I feel like life continues to get harder and harder the older I get.
You wear it well, sir.
Oh, I'm trying my best. But what I'm getting at is how important it is to diversify your medicine cabinet.
Ooh, damn.
So, and I'll start by just speaking through my own experience where it's like, okay, what does my medicine cabinet look like? Okay, I bought running shoes, so I'm going to run. That's one form of medicine. I lift weights. That's another form of medicine. I hike, another. I mountain bike. There's another. I have a therapist. Like full disclosure, I'm in my third year of working with a therapist. Like
I need to go, man. I
No,
want to go
like
so
no,
bad.
but that's another form of medicine.
Sure.
No different than people have other medicines that have been prescribed to them by their doc. And having a very, very diverse medicine cabinet, obviously I'm looking at this through a holistic point of view, is huge because it allows you to have the opportunity to pivot in so many different ways in having the ability to just take care of yourself. So through the and knowing that all those avenues, yeah, you have these physical components of going and hiking, riding your bike, running, all that kind of stuff, but you can't not acknowledge that there's a mental component to all of it.
For sure.
But tying into just the mental health piece relative to everything that's gone on in the world has been really interesting because I found this whole experience to be very interesting, and it really forcing the hand in whether people are willing to acknowledge it or identify it or not is that really putting me in a position of looking deeper as to how we all cope.
Okay.
So like for instance, okay, maybe you were used to going to the bar.
Right.
You know, maybe you were used to going and
Like
doing
your daily grind after you get out of work.
And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
This is why I'm just coming from a space of like, it's really important. Like when you work with a financial advisor, what do they want you to do? Diversify your portfolio.
Right.
I wholeheartedly believe that everybody needs to, what I now will call, diversify your medicine cabinet. You know what I mean?
I like
you need
that,
to have
man.
you need to have diverse forms of exercise and mental health and self-care in your life. Massage therapy, like go get a freaking manicure, go get a pedicure, go for a walk, like all that kind of stuff. Go see your therapist, but like really highlighting, I think, areas that have maybe not have been, and I don't want to speak out of place. I'm sure there are people that are going to disagree, which is totally fine and understandable, but really having this put people in a position of going through a heavy audit of how they were coping, or rather escaping, to where it's like, okay, say you were, this is hypothetical, but it's like, say you were during quote unquote the normalcy of life pre-pandemic, you were going to the bar, or you were drinking multiple times a week, or you were going out to eat multiple times a week, and that was helping you. It was through maybe a form of therapy, or maybe a form of escapism that now has been taken away from you.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you're forced inward, like not only physically and having to be home, but physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally.
You can't shed that weight that you accumulate every day.
Yeah,
that you let go when you go to the bar or whatever.
Yeah, you're forced to be by yourself and confront that. And that's where I think where it poses a really unique opportunity for people to diversify your means of healthy coping, and I would say healthy escapism, to where it's like, I can only draw on right now, like my example and some examples with clients, but like just, for instance, I'm big into mountain biking. That's a huge therapeutic element for me. Blew my tire out the other day. It's going to be in the shop for maybe 2 weeks. So I'm without it. And it's because things are so busy and things are backed up. So it's like,
well, bikes are super popular right now. That came way back.
Right.
COVID.
Right. So it's knowing that, okay, I'm not going to have this form of my medicine cabinet available. Right. So it's really good that I have put things in place where I have other avenues. It's like, okay, well, I don't stop moving. I don't stop exercising. I'm going to go run. I'm going to go walk. I have a road bike. I'll go road bike. I'll go hike. And knowing that everybody's in a position to be able to pivot. And that's my hope as far as everything going on, is it's forced people to acknowledge that, okay, maybe the way that I was doing things was not really as sustainable and as beneficial for me and my well-being as I thought it was.
So essentially growth. I mean, at the end of the day, because that's where it could be, I guess, potentially growth, right? Because you'd have to see, how do I replace these medicines that I ran out of prescription for? Right.
And just knowing when to pivot and when to utilize one over the other, which is part of the reason why I'm such a huge advocate for, if people need help and need to work with a therapist, there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Like, therapy is as normal as exercise.
Yeah, I love that. I saw that post the other day.
Yeah, and it's important that the stigma of therapy, the negative stigma around therapy and mental health, is gone forever, because it just doesn't make sense to me how somebody, how do I want to put this? It doesn't make sense to me how I can tell somebody, hey, I'm going to see a personal trainer, because I go into the gym. I don't know how the fuck to use any of the equipment.
Yeah.
I'm lost. I don't know how to manage my eating. And somehow people are like, yeah, absolutely go do that. But somehow when the time comes for me to tell somebody, yeah, I'm lost. I'm trying to figure things out on my own, and I'm tired of that. So I'm going to work with a therapist. That somehow that makes people uncomfortable. It blows my mind.
I want to say something on that, just because here recently, before you actually put that post out, funny enough, and today, I guess this is meaning some mental, that we needed to talk about this. The universe was bringing us here. Like 2 weeks ago, and purely because last week and this week at work, and also in my home life, with my wife becoming, she's starting to work after 7 years of not, and all the things that go with that. And not because of that, but I was actually seeking out what I thought was a psychiatrist. I thought you go to a psychiatrist. I want it because, I work around a lot of doctors. I work in medical. So I was like, yeah, I'd like to be able to talk to a doctor. I'm thinking therapist could be, I don't know, somebody that got like a certificate from a community college. Like, I was really minimizing things that I had not ever messed with before, purely because a lot of my circles don't, again, have the same thing like you said, where it's almost like a stigma against mental health or going to see a therapist. Like, when you actually say that, even as a a guy, you feel like less masculine for saying, well, I had to go talk to my therapist. Oh, you go talk to your therapist about your mommy problem? Like you know how that goes, bro.
Oh, sure.
So I called and I was using the wrong word apparently. So I called my insurance and I said, hey, I want to talk to a psychiatrist. Like, oh, psychiatrist, do you need drugs? And I said, no, I don't need drugs. I just want to talk to somebody about my brain issues. And so, okay, here's a list. So they gave me a list of these things. Bunch of were full already is what I got when I called these places. And then I called this place back like 3 days in a row and I was getting frustrated. I was like, why can't you guys just get me in? She's like, well, why do you need to see a psychiatrist? I said, I don't know. I need to go talk to somebody to work my issues out. She said, no, you need to talk to a therapist. Totally different deal. And going through these 3 days, I remember talking to a couple of my friends and some people that I work with. And every time I tell them that I want to go see a psychiatrist, not my healthcare friends that I work with, but other people, in proxy to that, why do you need to go there? Are you okay? What's the matter? Are you sure? Blah, blah, blah. Almost like it was like a thing that I was doing that I couldn't take back. You know what I mean? Like once you do that, man, you're going to start like spouting rainbows or something. Your man card's gone. I didn't know what was going to be the fallout from that. But I found that the more comfortable I was about, and being 32 now, I've got my kids and things have moved on. I'm a lot less shy about shit like that than I ever have been. But it still has stigma wrapped around it because I've never been to a therapist outside of I think in school when I got fucked up somewhere and they're like, you're going to go to the therapist, and you go talk to the therapist. But I've never really been to one. And I just thought it was interesting though, how hard it was for me to get in. And this is the point of me saying this. Joe Schmo has insurance. I have regular old insurance. I call the people and I get a hold of them. 4 phone numbers all told me that they couldn't get patients in. That already to me was so hard to get in the door because how else do you go? You don't just go like Yellow Pages a fucking therapist. You know what I mean? And when you do Google therapy,
it's a search, dude.
It's a search.
It's not just a search. It's I would call it a quest.
Yeah. Because then the guy that you first get, gal, whatever, may not work out and you may want to go to somebody else, and you're like, man, what a tragedy that this dude gets paid like $130 an hour for me to have to like work that hard to go and talk to him. Like I would think it would be more marketable to be like, I don't know, brain clinic, therapy clinic. Like it's just not a comfortable thing. So people just don't talk about it. And I think for that, the industry reflects that because it's, a therapist is not going out of their way to get you, but everybody needs a therapist. You know what I mean? And it's interesting to me because people will be like, I'll be like, well, you could benefit from it too. I'll tell a friend of mine for anger issues or something like that. No. I don't need that shit. They'll tell me, and I'm like, I don't even know what I need a therapist for, but I know I have enough things that I grapple with alcohol sometimes, right? If I'm having a super bad day, I'll buy a 6-pack on a Friday afternoon after I've gotten off work and I'm going to plow through that bad boy. I don't do anything except for just drink and watch TV all day because I'm just, I don't want to have my medicine cabinet only have those few things, just speaking to what you just said. And that's a great way to put it. Because I don't want to use beer to do that, right? I don't want to, sometimes I'll go for a run and I go out for a savage run because that's the only way I can work out those demons. And I'll come back and my knee hurts and I'm burning up and like, I'm literally just like sick. I've ran myself to where I'm going to throw up because I just had like a shit day or I'm pissed off at somebody or something. And it's like, all I have is these shoes to go running. But even then I just feel like that's the only way that I can vent that steam, let that pressure off. From things. So I'm sorry I took away from what you were saying, but that's how I felt about it. I was blown away. I was like, one, it took me a while to get to where I wanted to go see one. 2, it was hard as fuck to even be able to get a hold of one. And this next week, I am bound and determined to get myself into a therapist's office. But even you talking about massage, like I didn't know that your insurance company will actually cover a massage in a lot of cases. Acupuncture, not necessarily cover it, but maybe a piece of it.
Or if you have an HSA, use that towards like
exactly.
But see, this is where this is just my perspective because it really comes down to, I would argue the vast majority of the money we spend can be viewed as an investment in our health in some way, shape, or form. When you go to the grocery store, is that not an investment in your health?
Yeah, or in your sickness because you buy shit.
Sure, but you're nourishing something.
Yeah,
right?
I got you totally.
And same with like if you have an HSA, how on God's green earth is getting a massage not medicinal and can't be beneficial? Like if you are in physical pain, which I have been in, plenty of people have been in, and you get massage, how is that not? You know what I mean? Health, and and same with the mental stuff. If you are going through some stuff mentally, and I'm speaking from a position where I have had instances where I've been very sick mentally through anxiety and
Yeah.
putting myself in a position of just not being in a good place.
Right.
How is it that I can't go to somebody and talk to somebody and get more detailed, refined, compassionate help? How is that? Why is that viewed through such a negative lens?
Right.
And just sharing more of my experience, especially as it is, there is still a little bit of a negative stigma around being a man and just strength only being viewed through the lens of being angry,
Right.
and just
getting swole, bro.
being aggressive, being super big and strong and all that kind of stuff, and never once is strength being validated through acknowledging I need help.
Right.
I almost feel like it ties to the whole same adage of like guys not wanting to ask for directions.
Right. Well, you know what? I encapsulate that in these words that were taught to me, emotional intelligence, because that speaks to so many different things, especially with dudes. You can't ask for directions because you're too proud. That's a lack of emotional intelligence. If somebody says something that's super offensive to you, and there's all different spectrums of things being said that are offensive, but somebody says something that's offensive to you, emotional intelligence is really on you. You know what I mean? Like, how do you react to those situations, or not? How do you not react? Speaking to that emotional intelligence and asking for help through therapy is emotional intelligence, man. I mean, it really is at the end of the day, because you are better at your job because of that. You're a better friend because of that. You're a better, husband, future husband,
sure.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You're a better partner. You're a better son. The whole bit. I mean, I can even see more calmness in you than I did the last time. And I'm sure that has to do with you even just working out one extra little thing. I saw this awesome. I don't know if it's a meme. It was like a picture, but it showed somebody's brain, and it was like different colors of yarn, all like spaghetti together, right?
And them talking to a therapist and them like organizing
Each one,
the yard.
yeah, the yarn is spooled up. You might have shared that. I don't remember where I saw that, but it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know I shared it on my story a few times.
that might have been it. Yeah, and I thought that was that for some reason, as simple as that was, that really put it into perspective for me. It's like your problems don't go away, but you learn how to actually be able to handle them with intelligence and analyze them, and then that ultimately will change how the people around, I've got my 3 kids and my wife. I've got, tons of people that I work with all the time. And I know that there's days when I'm honestly struggling to not just like scream or something. Not every day, not all the time, not for sure. But like when I get frustrated at some point, I can't let things go from work sometimes. And I bring that home. Vice versa, going back to work, somebody cutting me off in traffic with the culmination of those things, that kind of shit to me, sometimes I just want to fucking lose it. And I'm like, I know that I'm not that person. I'm not crazy, but I feel like I should go talk to someone. That's what ultimately led me to where I'm at here. Yeah, I'm here.
You're human.
I love
and
it.
There's
I love
nothing
it. Yeah.
wrong with having that
Right.
stuff go on. You know what I mean? And it's just like speaking to my experience to try and draw greater context in the hopes that people can relate to it. Like I specifically remember being 18 years old, freshman in college at UNM, went through a traumatic breakup with a significant other at the time, and I was losing my mind. And it's really interesting being at where I'm at and looking back on how I handled stuff when I was younger, and I think this is common with most men in general when it comes to like the only acceptable form of behavior for guys is just to be angry.
Pissed. Yeah.
But and it ties into that emotional intelligence thing. Like I was hurt. I was very hurt, but I didn't know how to express it other than
Right.
the form of being very angry.
Right. Or just shutting all the way down.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which I went through both.
Yeah.
And I remember an instance where it was like I knew I needed help in some way, shape, or form. And I remember walking to and thinking about it for quite a while to go to try and see the campus therapist,
Right.
Through I think it was student health service area. And I ended up not doing it. I remember being on my way and my dad was in the area in Albuquerque. He called me. We went to lunch. We had a talk that was really helpful.
Yeah.
But I went, so that was 18 years old. And I think I was probably 27 or 28 years old when I actually saw somebody for the first time.
Wow.
So like that's a decade.
Yeah.
That's a decade that I went without getting help.
Right.
And trying to figure it out on my own.
What going through that, what are the differences? What's the difference now that you've done some therapy? And I realize it's not for everybody, it's not a catch-all, but what could you say has it benefited you? And maybe drawbacks, if there is any.
Obviously, so the let's see, where do I want to start here? Because first and foremost, what changed things for me was because as I got older into my late 20s, I just, being the health person I am, you hear it all the time, like, oh, exercise will help with it, eating better will. So like, I was like, okay, I'm checking all those boxes. I'm exercising, I'm eating well, I'm sleeping well. And Jesus Christ, I'm still not there.
Right.
Like I feel like there's this glass ceiling, and it was like, okay, I need to invest in help from a counselor or a therapist. So like I made that transition, and that's difficult in and of itself because people need help. And, in my experience, the cons, there are a few cons of it. And in my opinion, it's mainly the upstart and getting the help you need with somebody you actually vibe with, which is the con. The access or the lack of accessibility is very difficult because, one thing that if I could do things differently, I would have sought help whenever I wasn't in a place where I was feeling desperate for help. There were instances where I wouldn't feel too hot and it was like, okay, I need to go get help. And then that feeling would pass. And then I would be like, oh, it's not too bad. So then I'd wait a few more months. Yeah. But when I was actively looking for someone, that process takes a lot of patience. And I would advocate for anybody, like, keep at it, because thankfully I only went through seeing, two therapists total before I found my guy, which was the second therapist I met with. But it's difficult because it feels like there are multiple barriers to entry, making it more difficult to get help. So I was searching, trying to find somebody to get help from, found a guy, he specialized in hypnotherapy. So I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot. I had to pay full price for a full hour. I think it was over $100 to meet with him, but it was like, you know what? I just tried to reframe it. It's like, this is an investment in my health. In yourself, it's going to get me close. If it doesn't work with this guy, it's going to get me one step closer to the next person that is going to help.
That's an hour that you not only have gotten back, if you will, of your time, but it's going to probably live with you for the rest of your life. Because I'm sure every time you have one of those sessions, you get a little light bulb, one new one that's clicked on.
But with this, but part of that process that's difficult, it was like with this guy in particular, this first person I met with. Nice guy. The session went okay. I did a little bit of hypnotherapy, whatever, just to get a feel for it. But it was like, I don't vibe with him. Yeah. I don't have that energy. But it was like, okay. So then I called 3 to 4 different people. Some of them never got back to me. Some of them did and were like way off the deep end, like didn't vibe with them over the phone, didn't feel good. So it was like, okay, I got to still keep looking.
That's interesting. That makes me feel better about what I'm going through.
No, I think it's more common than it should be in all actuality. So then I kept looking, and then I found my guy, and I went to a session with him. And it's funny, this first session I had with him, I was at probably my breaking point where things were really, really bad for me. And I was in the worst space I probably had ever been in, and was just like, I was like, okay, I don't know you. I'm pretty sure the relationship I'm in is on the brink of falling apart. I'm losing my mind and I'm crying. Like, I never met this guy, and I was like, okay, if you're going to help me, you're going to earn your money today.
See all of it, right? Yeah. You're going to open up like Barbara Walters over here.
Yeah. So it worked itself out. So now, having done that, I tie back to that diversifying your medicine cabinet, because in the past, when I wasn't working with somebody or collaborating with a therapist, I thought, oh, I just need to exercise more. And it was getting to the point where I wasn't liking exercise.
It's a quick fix, but it doesn't last.
It wasn't doing it for me because I exercise enough as it is. And so it just got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm going to diversify it. So being in a place and understanding that everybody that's listening, it's an evolution. You're going to grow and find different modalities and different things that help. Yeah, you might have therapy, you have yoga, you've got all these different things that you can turn to, but it's understanding that that's going to grow and you'll find those things as time goes on. And what was really interesting was now growing into a place to where, like, for instance, yeah, you are going through a global pandemic, for instance, and making sure that you've got as many avenues to adjust and pivot into as possible, to where it's like, this is just from my personal opinion and experience, where it's like, I want to make sure that my self-care is not one-dimensional.
And that's interesting that you say that, because if I was to think of a trainer, just speaking to like kind of what I think where you're ultimately leading is, I'm thinking of all physical. And I think that it's under, like we touched on this all throughout this podcast, it is not just all physical. I mean, you're contributing to the mental part, but there's a whole circle that you have to go through in order for you to actually feel better. Cause you could definitely lose the weight, but if you're not there mentally, it's going to come back as soon as you stop working with Pat. You know what I mean?
Or whoever for that matter. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. And I think it takes time in really reconditioning one's view when it comes to spending money on training or a gym membership or massage therapy or something as simple as like a pedicure or a manicure, whatever it might be. And instead of viewing those things as, what is this costing me? Instead of viewing it as, this is an investment in myself. This is an investment in me. And I like to use the analogy of, well, we've only really got one vehicle in this life, and that's our body. So do we want this vehicle to be the most efficient, the most well-performing or highest performing vehicle on the face of the planet?
Right.
You're going to have, no different than a car. You don't just put gas in it.
Right.
You take it in for maintenance. If a shock is out, you change the shock, you change the tires. There's constant, sure, sometimes it's a pain in the butt and it's a grind, but that's your livelihood. That's getting you to work. That's helping you make money. That's helping you provide for your family. Why are we not taking that approach with our bodies and our own beings? As far as like, yeah, I'm going to go and get a massage once a month or once every other month,
Changing
whatever that
oil.
might be.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a yoga class a couple times a week or a couple times a month, whatever that might be. I'm going to go, and just viewing that and letting and trusting that will reshape so much for you.
Yeah.
And that's part of what that experience has been like for me in working with a therapist, where it's like, it's opened up so many different avenues for me of how I can better pivot and better adjust. When as in the past, I would have just been like, well, I'm going to go and work out and try to figure this out, as opposed to where it's like, no, this isn't a thing that working out can solve. Like, for instance, huge aha moment, which was super cool for me, was learning that what would be beneficial. I love exercise. It is a form of therapy, but it's also learning that the type of exercise is actually also important, because I know for sure I've got OCD tendencies. I like stuff to be a certain way.
Your house is incredibly organized.
So yeah, and good, bad, or indifferent. That's just who I am. But it's interesting in working with Jay, is his name. You're the man, dude. You're the OG. Getting a better understanding of how different types of exercise benefit me in certain ways.
Interesting.
So for instance, like I still love weightlifting, but I don't love it as much as I did in the past. But me venturing into styles and forms of exercising, and activities that are more under controlled. So what I mean by that is, for me, being the super, super detail oriented, anxious person I am, I like stuff being very controlled.
I have a friend that's listening that he knows who I'm talking about when I say that they're an awful lot.
Right.
Like
so
that.
like, for instance, like when trauma would happen in my life, and still to this day, I would go to a very over-controlled state. Okay. So whereas people, and granted, everybody, I'm speaking from my own experience, but say where somebody deals with trauma, you have somebody who deals with a trauma in their life. They go off the deep end. They're drinking. They're using substances. Whatever. Their life has gotten turned upside down. That's a more under controlled way of coping.
Right.
For me, I would go over controlled. I would become a hermit, and I would just bury myself in my work.
Right.
That's why I've learned more about, well, that's part of the reason why I did bodybuilding for 3 years. I went through trauma and I wanted stuff to be controlled.
Right.
So I did Weightlifting is a pretty controlled sport because your form has to be a certain way.
Right. Your food, your schedule, all that stuff.
My eating, all that stuff was super controlled. So it was really interesting when I started working with Jay. I was growing into a place to where I already had an interest in more under controlled forms of exercise, to where I'm exercising, but so like that's why I like mountain biking, for instance, because you're barreling down a hill. It's really hard for me to think about all the other crap that I'm trying to get done later on in the day, because I need to make sure my attention is literally focused on getting down the hill. Yeah. And knowing that I'm not going to be able to take a perfect line.
Yeah.
Every single second I'm riding.
Right.
It's like constant adjustment.
Compared to a bicep workout being very scheduled, very direct, and there's only one way to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's been a very interesting thing. And it's pushed me in a really unique space of feeling like I'm constantly diversifying that medicine cabinet. So I'm able to emotional intelligence, stuff of that sort, like you were talking about, being in a place of, or growing into a space of acknowledging like everything has its time and place. Whereas in the past, I used to lift weights all the time and I thought that was it. And as time has gone on, everything's got its own place and time.
Yeah.
And if I'm struggling with stuff, I then, I'm in a place where I'm way more open with my girlfriend, with my partner, as to what's going on in my head, as opposed to just literally keeping it to myself 100% of the time.
Then like, I'm guessing you can agree with this, just the same as with my wife. They always think that it's something that you have an issue with them.
Yes.
Because that's just the way men are. I think, not every guy, of course, but a lot of us will shut down and we kind of withdraw because we feel like it's almost our fault, whatever that problem is that we're having, or we should be manly enough to handle it, right? And not be a bitch, I guess, is the way to think about it. But then your wife or your significant other always thinks like, well, what is he thinking about? How come he doesn't,
Right.
And then it can turn into a fight. Like, you know what? For the last week, you haven't even been talking to me. Be like, well, I'm going through this shit. No guy does that typically, right?
Right. And growing, and it's been really great because, and that ties to my point here, and which will be my point from now until the day I die, of just destigmatizing the whole piece of asking for help and getting help, and making sure that just trusting that by being out in the open about what you're struggling with and what you're going through, trusting that that'll bring in the right kind of people and the right friends and the right support group, and it'll filter out the people that aren't going to be there for you in that regard. So like when I am going through stuff, I know I can just let Megan know. I can let her know what's going on. And maybe it is something to where like I need some alone time. I need to go and have a day trip where I go hike, or it's one of those things where it's like, well, maybe you need to give Jay a call.
Yeah.
And schedule something, and it not be viewed as like, oh, you're a wacko. Like you need to go get some therapy. It's like, no, go talk to he's now a friend of mine. So it's like, go talk to him. And it's like, okay. And this situational awareness of knowing that everything has its place and time, but knowing that for each individual listening to this, like you're just going to grow your arsenal and grow your tool belt as time goes on, where it's like, yeah, you've got all these different forms of coping and healthy activity, whether it's talk based through working with a therapist, or going to yoga, and just being open to constantly diversifying that, and being open to knowing that there might be one thing that you really liked and you thought was going to be the end all be all. You were never going to deviate from it. For me, that was weightlifting. And I thought, I'm never going to not do this 5 days, 6 days a week. And now 5 years later, I'm lifting weights maybe 3 times a week. Yeah. And I'm doing all these other things that I feel like my life is exponentially better as a result.
Yeah. And I can attest to that. I got a mountain bike for the first time in very, very long time, like an actual mountain bike. And like 3 or 4 months ago, I've dropped off a lot because I'm focusing in on a marathon that I signed up for in November. And it's a trail marathon. I've never done that before. But I had honestly, I think, maybe not, consciously, but I think I was seeking out alternative ways to move because my gym disappeared. Because it worked out for me that the 2 gyms that I went to, depending on which city I was in, because I live in one and work in the other, whatever day I had free, I would go to them. Well, they all got shut down with the pandemic. And, it wasn't that I needed to have it. I'm not quite as in anything, and anybody that knows me knows this. I'm not organized as well as I'd like, and I like that about my life. I like to keep it loose like that because it keeps it from getting stagnant, in my opinion. But I realized very quickly that losing that normalcy of like having that weightlifting all the time, it threw me off, and I kind of laughed because and this is in reflection, I bought that mountain bike and it kind of filled that gap in, and even more so because, like you said, it was
under controlled.
Under controlled. Yeah. Such a perfect way to explain it, because like I get out and I went and did one trail, which was probably a little more advanced for me, but I'm in decent shape, right? I run a lot. So I thought I can fucking handle whatever comes at me.
When you told me where you went, I was like, but it's funny because that was the first trail I ever rode.
Oh, really?
And I didn't get injured, but I looked back and I was like, that was really dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we're talking about is Dragon's Back, which is this amazing spot that, it's so common for people to go there. I thought, well, everybody else can do it, but I go there and I didn't realize until I see like people riding like $10,000 bikes, and they're getting to where they have to get off and push these bikes and carry them and some of those climbs. And I was like, oh no, maybe I messed up, and then I get up there and you're like up on it's a spine or like a ridge on this long strip of mountain, I guess. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere. And you get up on top of this thing, and it's really not as bad as we may be making it sound, but in some places you could definitely get really hurt. Or if you just went the wrong way,
you could die.
Easily. Very easy. It's like 1,000-foot drop at one point on either side of you. And then there's just so many spots where you'll get speed and not realize that you're getting into something that could just toss you over the edge, and you're hauling ass. And, like anybody that's got decent disc brakes, you think you got it figured out on your mountain bike. So I had this new mountain bike. I'm out there. I'm like, all right, cool. COVID time, there's gonna be nobody out here. There's all kinds of people out there. I was like, man. So once I get past everybody, I'm like, all right, I'm going to open her up, and I start going, and I'm shaking. I am so like afraid of fucking up, because I go down this one hill and I turn. If I didn't catch this line just right, I could have tossed my ass off into the void. But that's the place that we're talking about. So yeah, talking about diversifying the, and this is cool because this also illustrates how our paths are similar, but still a lot different. Where mine just came in naturally, that I just wanted to get a mountain bike. And, once I got one, I didn't realize until after the fact that kind of filled in for that. And it helped me, again, in reflection, diversify my medicine cabinet. So I like that idea of adding shit to it. I mean, even if you don't have like something that is physically speaking, like I tell people all the time, I wish I spent more time writing, and then also like drawing, because at one point I did like to draw. I'm a terrible drawer, but I like to sit down and, just fill up a notebook with stupid shit. I even, forgot how much I like to write chalk on cement.
Oh, cool.
Until me and my kids the other day, we went and filled out the whole driveway over here. Mm-hmm. And we were out there for like 3 hours, all sunburnt, just having a good time. And my son's making airplanes and we're fighting them on the, drawing with the chalk. And I was like, I can't believe how much fun I'm having doing this, and a lot of times I think, especially with COVID, especially with being quarantined, especially with not having good alternatives in your medicine cabinet, all of us have a bad habit of finding some TV show that you'll just watch for literally days. Like you could burn a whole weekend binge watching some season of some badass show. And there's a lot of pressure for that, because a lot of people, that's all we do as Americans is just watch TV, or on your phone, or and I'm so guilty of it, but I guess I don't realize that I'm kind of wasting that time, where even just doing some chalk drawing outside could be a fucking better way to spend my time and probably be more beneficial for my health, my mental health.
Yeah. You bring up some interesting points, because like first and foremost, I think of something my good friend, mentor, and now I guess you could say boss, Jonathan Goodman, shout out to the Personal Trainer Development Center. But from a business perspective, he's always said, we as coaches, we're not competing with other coaches necessarily. We're competing against Netflix. We're competing against other people's means of how they spend their time.
Okay, sure. The coping thing. That's awesome.
And
okay.
you bringing up like the being out and writing with the chalk, and part of what's been so eye-opening but I set this intention a long time ago, but COVID has exponentiated it. But where I just don't like how it's become normalized to let the child in us just die.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
that's part of the
I like
reason
that.
why I've always had an interest, even when I was so neck deep in weightlifting all the time. There was a part of me that longed to do yoga. There was a part of me
Right.
that longed to hike more.
Right. But it didn't seem like you were progressing the way that you feel like you are when you're doing that almost OCD bound thing of like lifting, right? Like if you miss a gym day and because you went hiking or something, it feels almost like you're not progressing, right?
Right. And that's why I always like to say stuff like this comes as an evolution for people. You know, it took years for that to take place, and things are going to constantly be evolving for me as time goes on. But like even the bike thing, I always, right? Like I grew up in, shout out to my freaking Peralta, New Mexico peeps. Like I grew up in Peralta where it was very much a rodeo, you know, Bosque Farms rodeo type town. There were ditch banks everywhere that literally my parent, I was riding my bike all the time.
Yeah.
Riding them up and down the ditches until
I lived in Bosque Farms for many, many years.
Yeah,
so that's the way you get around.
Yeah, so it's like you just rode your bike as a kid, and riding your bike even as an adult is fucking awesome.
Fun. Yeah.
And it's just like, why?
Well, and especially now because you can take a crazy ride and have a credit card on you. I couldn't do that when I was a kid, and I could stop at some rando sandwich spot and grab some gangsters, and you're like, oh my God, review it on Google, and it's a whole thing, and you're talking about it. Like there's a whole episode just from a goofy little bike ride.
Yeah, and just being able to make sure that you're doing what you can. Like for instance, another added dimension I'm trying to work on integrating it more is slacklining.
Okay. The word. Explain. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well,
yeah.
I don't.
I know
Again,
what you're talking about.
I'm just a newbie, but it's long story short. It's a set of straps that you tie around two trees, and you balance on like a I think it's probably 3 or 4 inches wide. Pretty much like a ratchet strap.
Okay.
And you're walking between the trees on this unsupported
on this
strap. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just continue like that. I find that to be just a playful thing. Like you would do that as a kid, just walk on a wooden fence and try to balance on it while walking across. And I think it's really important to make sure that at least what's valuable to me and important to me is making sure that I'm integrating different things in my life, you with doing the chalk, drawing, writing, reading, whatever it might be. Those have origins in our childhood and then keep us young, keep us agile, physically, metaphysically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all that kind of stuff. And making sure that you're consistently engaging in those activities to add more vibrancy and add more life to your days and your weeks, because that's part of a big thing that I always felt this way, but I feel like it hit the nail on the head with the pandemic is the hubris of the human race is acting as if we've got it all figured out.
Right.
Like we've got,
so well put, man.
we've got these systems put into place of like, okay, you go to work, you do these things, you live with a certain set of acceptable misery. You go work a job. You go work a job, and I know this is different for everybody.
Yeah, no, you're hitting the nail on the head.
You go to a job that you don't thoroughly enjoy, but you tolerate around people that you don't thoroughly love, but you tolerate, and then Mother Nature comes in, i.e., the pandemic, and it rips the rug right out from everything.
So any of those what is the word, consternations you had to not liking your job slowly go away because it sucks even more when you add something like the pandemic on there, right? I don't know if I use the right word, consternations. Any hesitations that you might have had about just barely liking that job enough to keep going. That shit gets
it's put a lot of stuff into perspective, and that was what part of it was for me whenever the pandemic first hit was I worked in the fitness industry. My job, I was furloughed. I was temporarily laid off for upwards of 3 months, and it just helped me, even though we had talked about it. Yeah, I had this arbitrary goal of 3 to 5 years, and I was thinking, if I really went back, I would lose a lot of respect for myself and who I am, and even tying into the mental health piece, like being able to express myself the way that I really want to express myself and be an advocate for the things that I'm really passionate about, that I truly believe are rooted in helping people, would be dramatically limited if I were to go back to that job.
Right.
So I wouldn't be able to help more people. So in one way, shape, or form, in my opinion, it would hurt people more than it would help.
And I could speak to that when I feel like gyms are almost the opposite of hospitals. Go with me on this. I think when you go see a doctor and you go in there and you're saying, "Oh, I'm this way. I've got this problem," the doctor may know that it's a nutrition issue, let's say, but they don't have the time, and they also don't. That's not the place for that, and it's not. The whole system's not constructed for you to be talking about how you may have gout because you're overweight. Consistently all the time, and the doctor can give you 20 minutes maybe of time altogether, but he's not going to go all in all on nutrition. And the way I see that is you almost like a doctor of the physical side, which is good, but you also don't have the ability to do those other diversified things when somebody goes to a gym, like you talked about. You don't, your mode is set up to go in there and work out. You're not talking about your food, your your food side that feeds into that nutrition, and you're not talking about mental health because this gym, this big box gym, is looking for that person to make another membership, to come in and lift and then leave. They're not trying to give them a classroom to sit there and go for an hour about your eating habits, and vice versa. Same thing with hospitals. Hospitals are not sitting there talking about, for one, mental health. That really does get missed a lot of times. I think, and doctors are paid to do something just the same as the gym is expecting you to be a physical trainer. That's all they want you to be. They don't want, has he done his hour? Get him out of here. We need to get more bodies in the door. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
They may not say that, of course, but
no, I know where you're coming from.
Am I kind of hitting it somewhere around
and
there?
I think that was part of at least my decision to just make an adjustment and leave and do something different, because diversify who I am, because I felt like I felt like I was being thrown into a one-dimensional space when I am, for those that know me, I am a very expressive, in a positive way, I would hope, a very loud and vibrant human being.
Absolutely,
and I can't stay within a space that's not going to fan that and encourage it. And it doesn't mean that they're bad or they're wrong. It was just, okay, that's just a different way of doing things, and it just doesn't work for me long term. So, yeah, and just tying it into the mental health front, it's just I will continue to be an advocate for it, and I would encourage anybody else to share their story and trust that will filter in the right people and filter out the wrong people that
That's awesome.
Really aren't there for you and aren't going to support you, and trust that it's going to bring about more good than bad, because, and I'm just speaking through my own experience.
No matter what your friends say.
Yeah. Like, and I'm speaking from experience
or
of
your dad.
staying in my head and staying quiet about it. And it was like, this is making my health and well-being worse.
Yeah.
So I
think that's where I'm at.
The opposite.
I think I'm at that point. And I wouldn't say that I'm losing my shit. Like by personal hobby, because my job is not what yours is. My exercising is my hobby, but I've grown that just purely because once I figured out I could run a marathon, I thought, well, I could bike 12 miles. I can bike 15 miles. Like, all those obstacles fall away because I have that self-confidence to do that. And I think I've gotten to a point where exercise is doing as much as it's going to do for me. And I'm kind of like you had said earlier, like it only does certain things, though. And it's a lot of things, but it's not going to be a therapist. As much as, like you said, like, I've always read these things about how people that run, their depression drops off by half, statistically speaking, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, that's how do you figure that? You know what I mean? Like, I could see that maybe you get some short-term hotness. You get a way overweight guy, loses weight by running, does it all on his own. Great. Takes him a year to get that way. But has he fixed all the things that got him heavy in the first place? Is it, a lot of us, like the guy that had written the note at Heart and Soul about how they'd given access to medicine. It's like, well, did that guy, is that just is that what they needed? Or is that, going to stand in place until they ultimately find out that they probably need to get a little bit more help or diversify that help? You know what I mean? The running is probably really good for them to get out and exercise, just like it is for me. But eventually I'm going to discover, and I think this has come with age and experience, that, like you said earlier, that glass ceiling, because I think I'm fucking there. You know what I mean? And it's I don't want to kill the world. I have a really awesome life. I'm very grateful for the opportunities and the place that I have, in this life. But a lot of times I wonder if I'm doing things right as a dad for my kids. I'm wondering if I'm doing things right for my big little brother, right? I've got talked about this in the last podcast, but I now have 4 new siblings in my life, and all these uncles, and my dad of all people that I never even knew that was a word I would ever use out loud as my dad, and it's interesting to like all these things you come into talking about those kinds of things. And I feel like I'm almost comparing myself constantly. And what am I comparing myself to? And if I can't come up with an answer myself, like to feel okay with that comparison or what I draw naturally from that, sometimes that can go bad for me. Maybe I feel like I'm being a shitty husband or I'm being a shitty dad, and I go for a killer of a run, and it does it for me in the short term. I feel good after I get done, running real hard and sweating it out, or a real long one. It just gets my mind off of things, and I do that meditation, but I come right back to that. And I think it's hard for me sometimes to just let shit go completely and or grow from it, accept the fact that I'm not a perfect dad, and I can do that. I can talk these things out. Like, this to me is therapy,
sure.
Doing this. And I'm sure you get the same thing. Like when you have to focus on saying things, especially in such a public forum like a podcast, it's nice to be able to say things. But you're not getting what a trained mental health professional could do for you. And just the same as somebody getting a running plan for me is not going to get a fucking fitness plan for me for food that's going to be worth a fuck. I'll be like, well, this is what I eat. I don't know. I'm not a mental health guy.
Right.
I'll tell you how to run, but
yeah. And it makes me think of another very big pro that it ties into you talking about having more emotional intelligence, of being able to further understand what's going on and how it's different than what you thought it was.
Yeah.
So like, for first and foremost, like having a sounding board for big life decisions. Before I decided to leave my last job, who do you think I talked to? I talked to my therapist.
Okay.
It was like I was super nervous.
Yeah.
It was like this was this big thing that I had played up in my head. But the thing is I wasn't necessarily nervous.
Yeah.
I was excited.
Right.
And I was confusing my excitement for what is negatively viewed as anxiety.
Like
you might, like, oh, my
you thought you might fuck up by doing this rather than it being
and
an
just
opportunity.
misinterpreting misinterpreting what's going on with my body, because it's like I could tell I was anxious.
Yeah.
I felt nervous, but it was like, really, when we got down to it and talked about it, I was really freaking excited.
Yeah.
Like what we had talked about before the podcast, everything that was going on, like me being a part of the personal trainer development center, all this stuff that was in the works. And it was just, I was super excited for what the future had in store, but I knew I had to make a decision in leaving this job if I wanted to do that. And I was misconstruing that as me being full of anxiety that could put me down a negative path, instead of me being able to acknowledge, no, this is excitement. This is okay. This is good.
Change
this
is
good.
Good
anxiety.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, because otherwise I would know it to be, oh, I'm anxious. And then I'd start going down a bad path rather.
Right.
So just in being able to bounce that, it's just stuff off of somebody in general, off of somebody who's not your significant other all the time. That's not your family. That's not your friends. That's not nearly as emotionally invested in you.
It's like a third party, neutral party.
Oh yeah. And it's a trip. And when you're doing it with somebody you really vibe with and you really trust and you really enjoy being around, it does feel like talking to a friend.
Yeah.
And it's cool.
I had a counselor transfer to a high school before I ended up graduating and then transferred back. But I was there for a hot minute. I had no friends. I didn't know anybody there. It was, again, one city to the other. I went from Las Vegas to Albuquerque, some school in Albuquerque, which I'm not a big fan of. But I had to go there like my junior year of high school. And I just remember going into this counselor's office, and it was just part of the deal. And Albuquerque works slightly different than it did out here. And I go into this guy's office, and I thought to myself, oh, this will be stupid. And I don't know what it was, but just having this person happened to jive with me. And this is totally different, I think, than the adult version of myself. But I just remember like a switch getting hit when they're like, are you okay? And I just started bawling, man. And it takes a lot for me to cry without like being actually hurt or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I've cried like that in front of a complete stranger even since then, not just like breaking down, but I was literally bawling and just like, and it wasn't even that big of a thing. I think it was just having a safe place to just like let that shit out, and it's not like I'm waiting to cry now. It's just more like, there's a lot of things I want to talk about that, like you said, as a third party, and just to have somebody just like, here's this fucking truckload of emotion. You tell me how you,
well, like that visual analogy we're talking about. Like you've got all this tangled yarn.
Yeah.
in your head, all these tangled thoughts. You're like, oh my God, I have no idea. And it's nothing short of art. It's nothing short of art and poetry, seeing that happen in real time, to where it's like, okay, perpetual word vomit. Here you go.
Yeah.
Like, and them being able just to
pull stuff apart.
Artfully organize it and put it into context. It's really cool, and it's a real thing. So it's for anybody that's able to experience it. It's well worth it.
So I think the gist of that piece of the podcast would probably be that take your mental health as seriously as you do your physical health. And if you haven't done either one, definitely keeping it in mind that one is not greater than the other, and that they are very much tied together, I think is important, because that's something I think you and I are basically touching on 100 times here, is that just through the evolution of us being, you so more than me, but like health-minded people and being fitness people, we were just as susceptible to getting lost in that idea that, oh, maybe the more I exercise, the better I'll be. And it is one part of it. But I think the other part is it's okay to get mental help. You know what I mean?
It's okay to not be okay.
It's okay to not be okay.
I'm sure plenty of us during at least this pandemic have been like, I'm not okay.
Right. Cool. So we had a slight pay break. So yeah, we're talking about all kinds of stuff. Mental health is one of the big ones, and in regards to the pandemic and someone's overall health, right? So that was kind of the direction that I kind of sold to Pat before we got the episode together. But we talked about a lot of stuff besides this in the last 2 episodes, so I figured this would be a cool spot to fill in on these long form episodes. And then guys, keep your eyes out. We may end up doing some sort of a keep your eyes out or keep a lookout. How do you say that? Did I say
keep your
it?
eyes and ears open or something?
Keep your eyes and ears out.
I don't know.
We plan on putting out maybe some more content consistently in the future, just Pat and I, maybe a guest or something.
Sure.
But I'm guessing that it'll be more geared towards this, being that People Pursuing Greatness is a little more focused on health and the things that I'm interested in, but also my friends, which Pat is one of those. You'll find as you get older, that you only have so many friends, and they're the ones that are very meaningful to you, and Pat's one of those.
You're a man. I appreciate that,
yeah,
dude.
for sure, dude. And we don't hang out as much as I'd like to, but I definitely feel like every time that I interact with the guy, he's always got good things to say, and he's very positive, especially with the people around him, and that's what I like to be around nowadays. And with that, what I wanted to kind of segue into is some actionable things that there's all kinds of different situations with this pandemic, but if somebody has a situation, and I was just coming up with one, but a single mom, let's say 2-3 kids, they have to work, but they also are, their health is sliding, and even more so during the pandemic. What advice would you give to them, or actionable things, like little things that they could do to maybe alleviate some of those problems, I guess they would be? So
the first thing that comes to mind, and this will be kind of all encompassing as kind of in just viewing this phrase, start small, work big. So it's understanding that, yes, we've got these big goals, these big things that we're wanting to integrate in our life, but also understanding that in order to get there, it takes small steps. We just spent the majority of this podcast talking about my own evolution in being open and accepting of asking for help through the mental health space. So that's no different than when it comes to integrating an exercise routine or growing your business or getting a promotion, etc. Is understanding that it takes small, almost might feel like non-existent steps to get where we're going. So starting small, working big. And the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm viewing this through the lens of as somebody, and I know I'm not alone here, just seeing the state of the world and how it's very easy to see, at least on social media, or feel like the world is gonna end,
right? And
that the world's gonna burst into flames. There's a lot of negativity out there. I would advocate, and I would encourage anybody that's going through something, that's wanting to gain a little bit more control and sense of home and sense of peace as kind of like a springboard for an improved life, is I always like the phrase, there are a lot of good people around, and kind of viewing that as a mantra and viewing that as each one of us individually are part of that whole. What I'm getting at is there are a lot of good people around. I'm sitting across from one. I'm sitting in the home of those people what I'm advocating for is we need to be louder. And what I mean is we need to be louder in sharing all the good things that happen. For instance, the other day I was talking about how I blew my tire out mountain biking.
Right.
Some random dude on the trail and his 2 dogs offered to give me a ride.
Oh, that's awesome.
Back to my truck. And it's like, you know what? If this guy's cool with it, I'm going to take a photo of us, me, him, and his dogs.
Right.
And I'm going to post it on social media because that was a really nice thing for him to do.
Right.
It shaved 30 minutes off of my walking back to my truck. And I think more people need to be doing stuff like that. The stuff that seems kind of inconsequential is like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah, that guy didn't have to help you, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, starting there and sharing those experiences first and foremost, because it doesn't mean you've got to acquire a new piece of equipment. Most people have a smartphone. Like share the really cool, awesome shit that's going on.
Right.
And trust that in some way, shape, or form, it's rewiring your brain. It's changing the way that you look at things. It's changing the way that you look at interactions with people.
Do you think that's kind of like considered to be great? It's considered being grateful?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's supposed to be like one of the bigger parts of mental health is to wake up every day and try to count the things you're grateful for, that you're blessed with, right? That's
right.
That's huge, man. You really brought that full circle. I like how you did that.
Yeah. And you talk about getting up and getting ready. Like one thing I've always thought about is like how many, and I'll touch back on some of these actionable steps here shortly, but how many people or how many of us have really thought about waking up in the mirror and looking waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror and being like, you're fucking awesome. and saying that to yourself, like you have done good, bad, or indifferent. You have made it to this point in time. You're awesome. And letting that start your day. And I understand that not every day is going to be great.
Right.
You're going to say that and you're going to be like, I don't believe a word.
Back-to-back shifts today. What do you mean?
Right. But I like to start there because I know gratitude has really helped shape. It's really helped shape a lot for me.
Is that what I wasn't saying that was? I was saying gratefulness. Gratitude.
You said gratitude.
Did I say gratitude?
I don't know. Being grateful.
Sorry.
You know what I mean. Everybody knows. Yeah, but gratitude. And then from that point, starting small, working big. I'll use myself and some of my clients as an example. Like for me, I've been wanting to integrate a more regular stretching and meditation routine. And it's easier for me to go to this place of thinking like, oh, I need to start allotting an hour for it. Well, I acknowledged I needed help. So I reached out to a buddy of mine, shout out Brian Matsky, yoga, meditation, mindfulness extraordinaire I think he lives in Albuquerque, North Valley. But I reached out and was like, what are some recommendations as to getting this integrated? And he gave me advice that I already knew, but it was helpful to get it from someone else.
Reinforce it almost.
Yeah, like start small. Like literally he guided me through, okay, with your meditation practice, give yourself 11 days and start with a minute on the first day. And meditate. Okay. Like turn your timer on for a minute and just close your eyes, pay attention to your breathing, count your breaths, whatever. And then when the minute is up, literally go about the rest of your day. And then the next day, tomorrow, do 2. And the following day, do 3. And then build yourself up to 11. And then you can either stay at 11. I prefer to stay at 10. And that's been, and now it's blossomed into, I do a meditation in the morning, and then it's followed with like 10 minutes of stretching.
That's awesome.
So I've gotten the best of both worlds, knowing that might grow into something more or might stay exactly where it's at. So, relative to, whether it's meditation, maybe working through some kind of an approach that way, or even if it's stretching, working through that kind of approach where it's like just a lot, literally 1 minute. Don't get caught up in feeling like you've got to get an hour going. A minute, and take a minute to just stretch. Set your timer, do it. Once the timer goes off, be done with it. And then try to maybe do 2 minutes the next day. Because if we really look at it through a long-term lens, say you do that for 300, no, I'm not advocating anybody stretch for 365 minutes, but over the course of time, say you did that every day for a year, then you've built up to being able to do 365 minutes of stretching or meditation.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Okay,
like you're slow.
yeah.
It's a slow drip approach.
Right. Okay.
And as for exercise, kind of viewing it through that lens as well. If you can, get up and try and walk for a minute and build and walk, do 2 minutes, do 3 minutes, do 5-minute blocks, and just put things together to where they're almost so easy they're laughable, to where you're like, that's a joke.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of what we get into is we put ourselves in these positions of feeling like we've got to go into this huge undertaking of like, oh, the pandemic's happening, gym equipment's scarce, all that kind of stuff. Gyms aren't fully open, et cetera, and feeling like, well, in order to get a good workout in, I've got to get an hour. It's like, well, I'll do you one better. How about we just try 5?
Right.
Or how about we try one minute? And then if you can do that, you can do a minute, and then you try building up from there. And really, really viewing everything, and this ties into my first point around doing the best we can to summon gratitude, because it was like it's like when I blew my tire out on my bike, I wasn't pumped about it, but it was like, you know what? It turned into a hike. Now I get to walk.
Right.
Now I get to take my time, enjoy the scenery, and then what do you know? 20 minutes later, I get a ride.
That's awesome.
Like it worked out.
Yeah.
And viewing everything as an opportunity and trying to be crafty and pivoting and doing the best you can with what you have. So like if you're at home, not feeling like you've got to go into debt to buy equipment. If you've got a backpack, throw some books in it. Put it on your back while you walk for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes and literally trust that that's your workout, and know that plant that is your behaviors and that your habits will continue to blossom and grow.
Sure.
And you'll start to look at things through a different lens, through, I would hope, a more optimistic and a more opportunistic lens. So where it's like stuff doesn't sidetrack you or sideline you as much as it used to, as opposed to, okay, there's a pandemic, oh, the gyms are gone, now I can't work out, to where it's like, no, this is cool. There are other opportunities for me to move. Maybe I've always wanted to hike. Maybe I should start going and hiking.
Right.
And
that's one thing we have a lot of in New Mexico, which I think is I don't know about underused right now, because it is starting to get a lot more, but it's undervalued, I think, as an actual exercise, because that's what it is. I mean,
take a walk, dude. Take a hike.
Take a hike.
But yeah, it's the actionable steps through whatever it is that you're wanting to get into, whether it be meditation, getting a little bit more physical activity, stretching, yoga, whatever it might be. In that aspect, I would always advocate start small. Start with something laughably small as 1 minute.
Yeah. And then grow from there.
Sit up and down off the couch for a minute, and then be done with it, and then try doing 2 minutes the next day. And I think you'd be surprised as to how your body will adapt to that. It'll get stronger, and then that can end up growing into other aspects. As for the mental health side of things, another big recommendation that I would have would be relative, and I understand this is going to be different for everybody, but like relative to what each individual is comfortable with. And I know it's going to mean something, it's going to mean different things to different people, but being more vocal about what you're going through. If there's somebody that you think is going to be a good sounding board that you can lean on, that you can talk to, give it a shot. And let them know. I know it's going out on a limb, and I'm speaking as someone who's not a professional in that realm. I'm only speaking as somebody who has gone through it in my own way. But getting out of your own head, sharing your pain with somebody else, knowing that the right people will be there to help you through it. If not, help provide solutions and guidance and other people that are more qualified to help. But if we stay to ourselves, that it could end up, and I'm speaking through my own experience, it could make things much more difficult than they need to be.
And not just for you, but for the people around you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, quite a bit. I didn't talk about this too much, but even with my wife, I started listening to anger management audiobooks. I started listening to self-reflective audiobooks while I run, and it just that little teensy tiny bit of just taking a little nibble off of that cookie of working on that problem. it's given me a lot of little tools that I would have never thought I needed before. Like I just understood it as an emotion. I didn't recognize it for what it was. And that is something that enticed me enough to want to go see a therapist. Because even in the book, it said 100 times, this book is not a therapist. You need to go talk to a therapist. But when you find yourself having XYZ, try this tool, you know, and a lot of it was pay attention to the more nuanced things, you know, the way that you verbalize your problems, the way that other people are verbalizing problems, and the way you react to that. And a lot of times the way that if somebody says something to you, you not grasping the fact that they have a perspective that you may not, you know what I mean? Whether that's your boss, your significant other, your kids, some guy that, you know, holds the door for you at the restaurant or something, I don't know, cuts you off in traffic, all that kind of stuff. Those things it's so easy to just not think about it and be selfish almost, and just fucking, if I'm in a bad mood, you're going to feel it too, is not going to help anybody, man. And I, you know, just through the pandemic and through my own experience, and, you know, you guys listening, you haven't heard me do a podcast since February, but the pandemic was a little bit tough for me and my family. It was tested, you know, myself, and I think all of us, we can all attest to that in some way, shape, or form. You know, we're social animals, and that was just cut right out from underneath us. And for good or for bad, we need to have something that, that we can cling to. And I think that even clinging to could turn into habit. Like, let me cling to mountain biking instead of going to the bar. You know, let me cling to talking to my dad I haven't talked to ever, you know, and expand on those things, because there's a lot of things that I have to talk about, and Netflix could be in the way of that a lot of times, because I'm just watching TV instead of just having a conversation. So I think things like the pandemic are good and they're bad. They're bad and they're good. I'm gonna say more bad than good, but you know, because they make you really go into those places. And I think if you don't have tools, but also options, you know, of things to do. And I love what you said about being grateful, because I don't do it enough at all. A lot of times I'm beating myself up. Oh, I'm already late to work. I already had these things behind. I've already had a bad day, instead of it's a wonderful day. I have a job. I have a car to drive me there. You know, like, I'm going to have a great lunch today because so-and-so is taking me to my favorite Mexican joint, you know, rather than the other perspective of that. And I think that can flow into so many different things, you know, your home life and shit like that. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this stuff, because I think people needed to hear it, man. And I think especially with you, like, your growth it's amazing to see, bro, because that's not something that I even knew you were really dealing with the therapy stuff. And it's so funny that today's Mental Health Awareness Day,
right? And
we're talking about this stuff.
Well,
man.
And I think it's more prevalent than people lend itself to be or believe to
right.
be. And I think we just live in a culture and a society where it's viewed as one being a burden if they bring up, because for me, and speaking through my own experience, it was just a matter of, I always viewed me bringing any kind of issue I had going on and bringing it up verbally as a means of me complaining.
Right.
I'm not a big person around
right.
complaining.
You're a put in the work kind of guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And it would keep me silent around aspects where it was like, no, you need to speak up and you need to get some help with these things.
Right. Get that shit off your chest.
Because I didn't want to feel like I was a burden on other people. And I think a lot of people might be able to relate to that. So, but that's where I find the pandemic to be really interesting, to where you see, I would play devil's advocate here in saying the prevalent theme on social media is that it's very negative, and I would turn the focus and the attention back on us, the users. So from my perspective, it shows that what you put your energy into works.
Right.
So if the predominant theme of things is negative, in my opinion, it shows that what you put your energy into can manifest itself. So
I see what you're going with.
If people are willing to be open and loud about the really cool stuff that goes on in life, no matter how small, no matter how big, it can reshape the dynamic of a platform that has been demonized. That
is huge, man. I'm so glad that you said that, because that's exactly, a lot of times I feel bad about posting so much on social media, and mine's less business oriented, but I get a 50-50 on that. I try to be loud and proud about my habit of running. That's really all I post about. But I've heard, since years ago, I've had people tell me, sometimes your posts, they kind of motivate me, for one way or another. And I always try to think through that lens that I'm kind of speaking about the thing that, one, I did, and then two, I'm grateful for, I guess, in a sense, because I'm just happy that I'm able to knock out that 10-mile workout. Because I start out just like every other human does when I start running. First mile, I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like,
it's a little
I have
rugged.
so many other things that I could be doing right now, and it's every run, no matter how often. I think it's huge to talk about that on social media in a way like, hey man, you can do it too, and that's what I love about your posts, man. Before we get off the podcast, let's talk about where people can follow you, and where can we, I know that we do this every podcast, but I want to make sure that we got the right stuff. Where can we see Pat's amazingly motivated posts?
Sure. Yeah. If you're on Facebook, Patrick Ryan the second, that's Roman numeral 2. My website is www.aware.training. And then if you're interested in following me on Instagram, it is at aware_life_ABQ.
Yes. And it is some of the best stuff to come into your feed when you get it. Cause Pat never puts out any horse shit. He's never given it to you easy either. It's always like, you got to put in the work kind of stuff, but he also gives some stuff I never thought about. A lot of stuff like you hear in this podcast. So definitely follow my man, and he loves cookies. So,
yeah, shout out Rude Boy Cookies. I always got to do that.
Well, that's cool, man. All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I think we've done all that we can, I think, in this one. And, like I said, I'm hoping to, this is October. I'm hoping November we can do another one, maybe around that.
I'm game, dude.
Of course, bro.
Let's just set a time and a date, and we'll make it happen.
Well, I'm always grateful having you on, man. Thank you so much for coming out. He actually came to my haunt this time, so coming from the main castle here. So we appreciate you guys listening. Thank you very much. Go out to ppgpodcast.com. That's the new website. I'm not really doing anything with it. There's just the episodes are there. But it does help me out a lot when you guys share the episodes, and reviews on iTunes are also amazing. Thank you guys for listening.